Elijah Moore wants the Jets to trade him. There are plenty of implications. We will discuss all of them. And oh yeah, there's a game Sunday. The Jets play the Broncos. We will break that game down today on the Locked On Jets podcast.
You are Locked On Jets, your daily New York Jets podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome, this is the Locked On Jets podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. It's Friday, October 21st, 2022, and I'm your host, John B. from GangGreenNation.com, thanking you for making the show your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and available on all platforms, including YouTube. If you like what you see or hear, hit the subscribe button. You'll never miss an episode. If you're watching on YouTube, please give this episode a big thumbs up. Helps the channel out, and it helps other Jets fans find the podcast. Today, our episode is brought to you by BetOnline. BetOnline has you covered this season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. BetOnline, where the game starts. Well, the Jets play the Broncos on Sunday. Kickoff time is scheduled for 4:05 Eastern in Denver. And make a note of that, because many of the late games in the NFL, the late afternoon games, kick off at 4:25. This game on Sunday is 4:05, so you may have to miss the last few minutes of the early game that you're watching if you want to make sure you watch the Jets as they kick off. And we will get to that game, but unfortunately we have something else to discuss today, because yesterday Elijah Moore requested a trade from the Jets, and I cannot say that this came completely out of the blue, because the rumblings of this situation began Sunday afternoon after the Jets beat Green Bay. There was a Jets reporter who tweeted out a note that Elijah Moore had 0 targets in the game. Now, he actually had 1 target, but it was wiped out on a penalty on the Jets offensive line, and the pass fell incomplete. And Elijah Moore responded to that tweet, and he kind of expressed some unhappiness with this, with not getting involved in the offensive game plan. And yesterday, the situation kind of progressed, and Elijah Moore left Jets practice. They initially described it as a situation where he had an excused absence. We found out later that there was a situation between Elijah Moore and Mike LaFleur. Elijah Moore ended up requesting a trade for the Jets later in the day, and it does not sound like the Jets are going to trade him. And there are it's very easy to get emotional. It's very easy to have a lot of melodramatic takes. In a situation like this, it's best to kind of let the situation play itself out. And there's always a tendency to view these NFL players as guys who are completely different from everybody else. And on some level, that's true. They play, they make a lot of money. They play at the top of their sport. They're some of the world's greatest athletes. But in situations like this, my tendency is almost to take the opposite approach. And it makes me realize that NFL players really are not that different from you and me, because what this situation really boils down to is a very relatable situation. Elijah Moore's mad at his boss. And we all get into situations like that. And sometimes we're wrong. I mean, sometimes all of us get mad at our boss, and it's completely unfair. We're completely wrong. And I'm not making a statement, David or Ross, if you're watching or listening to this, I'm not saying I'm mad at you. I love you guys. You guys are the greatest bosses. So I want to make it clear. I'm not making some sort of subtle statement that I'm mad at my boss. But I'm saying we all get to a point where we're frustrated at work. And sometimes we take it out in a way that's not productive. And to me, that's what happened with Elijah Moore. Everybody wants to make this out to be the end of the world. And listen, this situation, the ending of it's not clear. Sometimes something like this happens, and it's either the end or it's the beginning of the end for a player. We saw that, Jamal Adams a few years ago at the trade deadline in 2019. He was angry because the Jets almost traded him, and he kind of indicated that he wanted out. And that was kind of the beginning of the end. But it took a while to play out. And it was not a foregone conclusion that Jamal was going to get traded. And sometimes this stuff goes away. A different sport, but another New York team, Kevin Durant. At the beginning of the offseason, he was done. Now he's back. Now it's like, I'm not sure it's like it never happened, but the situation continues. And at this point, it looks like the Jets really have no intention of trading Elijah Moore. Nor should they. Because here's the problem right now. These two sides need each other. They may not like each other. Elijah Moore may not like the Jets. I'm sure the Jets aren't thrilled with Elijah Moore right now. They kind of need each other, though. I mean, if you're the Jets, I don't see how you trade Elijah Moore because his value is not going to be very high right now. He's not producing. And that may not be entirely his fault, but you'd essentially be trading a player at his all-time low value because, he's not been that productive the last couple of weeks. Now you have this situation. When you trade a player at a spot like this, teams are buying low and you're not getting a great return. But beyond that, and the bigger deal is, who do you replace him with? This is not a point of the season where it's going to be easy to find another starting caliber receiver. And, if you put Braxton Berrios into the starting lineup in place of Moore, you're kind of taking a downgrade. No offense to Berrios, but you are. And if somebody gets hurt then you're really in trouble because now you got Jeff Smith in the starting lineup. So now you're back to the days where you don't have a credible wide receiver. Now, the Jets aren't getting much from their passing game right now, and it's a run-oriented offense, and that's the way I think the Jets want to be, but at some point you're going to reach a game where you're going to need to ask your passing game to do something, and you want to make sure you have as many quality weapons around Zach Wilson as possible. So there's no incentive for the Jets to trade him, and if you're Elijah Moore, maybe you want to leave, but if the Jets don't trade you, what choice do you have? I mean, you can either not play football, and not only will Elijah Moore not collect his salary if he doesn't play football, he's going to get fined. He'll lose money. So, if the Jets, there's really no reason for the Jets to trade him right now. Again, offseason, we'll see where this relationship goes. And listen, sometimes maybe Elijah Moore comes back and plays great and all is forgotten. That happens sometimes. Maybe it's a situation where this just drags into the offseason and then the Jets will be at a point where maybe they can replace him. There will be viable alternatives. We're not there yet, though. So I don't see how the Jets trade him right now unless you get a quality receiver in return. And I don't know that anybody's going to trade a quality receiver for Elijah Moore. And if the Jets aren't going to trade him, what's Elijah Moore going to do? Retire? You're going to sit out and get fined and not collect a salary? It's not like he's made that much money in the NFL where he can just sit around and, throw away paychecks. So these two sides need each other. It's a classic situation that you deal with sometimes in a regular work environment. And this is the funny thing, because we always view these things in these melodramatic terms, these professional athletes. But sometimes you condense these situations down, they're not that different from what you and I face in our regular lives. Sometimes you don't get along with people you work with. Sometimes you're mad at your employer. And sometimes you just have to work through it because you need each other. They need you to produce. They need you to do your job effectively. And you need them to continue your career. And maybe things get better. Maybe like all the frustrations go away at some point. Maybe Elijah Moore comes back and produces and he gets the amount of targets he's looking for and becomes happy. Or maybe he doesn't. Maybe this thing just drags out. You hope it's not a situation where this happens again. Because if this happens again, Jets probably going to have to deactivate Elijah Moore for the rest of the season. If Elijah Moore can't buy in, then unfortunately, his Jets career might be over. But you're hoping he comes back. You're hoping they can at least get through the end of the season. And then once you're to the offseason, then you can look at this and figure out whether this relationship's working. Then the Jets will have all options to make a move, perhaps upgrade the receiver position, maybe get decent value for Elijah Moore because he will have come back and shown, put good film out there rather than 3 weeks of really not doing much. And the rest of the league, seeing that he's unhappy with the Jets. So these two sides need each other right now. And it may not be an ideal situation for anybody, but that's why you get paid the big bucks in the NFL if you're Robert Saleh and Mike LaFleur. That's why you're there. Your job is to work around these situations. And I don't think, is Saleh responsible for this? We don't know what's going on. My guess would be no. Is LaFleur responsible for this? I think probably not. Probably not in a meaningful way. But it's their job to deal with it. So it's just a situation that you're going to have to work around. I don't think anybody can defend Elijah Moore for the way he's going about this. Again, just because you're mad at your boss, that doesn't make you right. And as I think people are accurately pointing out, Jets have been winning games. And it's a balance. These guys are professionals. This is their career. This is their job. You and I have our job. It's how we make our livelihood. And especially at the receiver position, I know it can be frustrating because there's no position that's more dependent on factors beyond your control than wide receivers. The malcontent receiver in the NFL is almost a cliche, Well, the reason the players express their frustration at the receiver position more than any other spot in the NFL is that you can't really. There's so many factors beyond your control. If you're a running back, of course, it's not all about you. You need good blocking, but you can make guys miss. You're a quarterback. You can read the defense. You can throw the ball accurately. Now, again, you need good. It helps to have good blocking. It helps to have good receivers, but you're still in control of a lot. If you're a defender, you can tackle guys. If you're a defensive lineman, you can sack the quarterback. There's a lot that's in your control. A corner, you can shut down the receiver. At wide receiver, you can run your route perfectly, but if you're not the guy the play's designed to go to, or the quarterback doesn't see you or hit you, you're not going to produce. And then contract time comes along, and your team's saying, "Well, you're not producing. It's really not your fault." And I've watched the film on Elijah Moore, and I've come to the conclusion that the issue is, I don't think the issue is Zach Wilson. I think the issue is that the Jets are not designing any sort of plays to feature him. I went through those Green Bay passing attempts, and I included the penalties, I included the sacks, I included the scrambles by Zach Wilson. I could not find a single play where he was the featured option in the play. And I think that's probably the frustration. It's not so much that he's not getting the ball, it's that Jets aren't even making an effort in their play calling to get him the ball. And again, I'm not saying I'm defending him for that. I'm not saying it's right. I'm not saying that this is the response he should have. I'm just saying this is why it's happening, I think. But there's a lot to go here. I don't think the situation is going to resolve itself quickly. I think we're looking at least a few months here. Hopefully he comes back. And, these situations, sometimes they look hopeless, and then player comes back and, produces, and everybody's happy again. So you can hope that that's the situation the Jets find themselves in. But there is a game Sunday. Jets play Denver, 4:05 Eastern. As we continue on this Friday episode of Locked On Jets, we're going to talk about what the Jets will do on the offensive side of the ball without Elijah Moore. Well, unfortunately, this Elijah Moore drama prevents us from talking about real football, what's happening on the field. Three of my favorite things are football, and saving money. So let's talk about saving big money right now with SimpliSafe Home Security. They are offering Locked On Jets listeners 40% off their advanced security system. SimpliSafe was just named the best home security of 2022 by US News. They love it, and you'll love it, because at SimpliSafe, your safety is the only thing that matters. With 24/7 professional monitoring, when a threat is detected, SimpliSafe's monitoring professionals promptly contact you and dispatch first responders to your home, even if you are away or unable to respond. SimpliSafe blankets your home with protection, with advanced sensors for every room, window, door, HD security cameras for inside and outside your home, smarter ways to detect motion that only alerts you when a threat is real, and even hazard sensors that instantly detect fires, floods, and other threats to your home. Don't miss this chance to save big when you protect your home with the best. Get 40% off your order when you visit simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl. Customize the perfect system for your home in just a few minutes. That's simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl, simplisafe.com/lockedonnfl. Go today. There's no safe like SimpliSafe. Thank you for making Locked On Jets your first listen or first watch every day. This podcast is free and it's available on all platforms, including YouTube. The Jets play Denver this weekend. It's gotten lost in the Elijah Moore news, but the Jets do have a game on Sunday. They play the Denver Broncos again. I reiterate, 4:05 Eastern, not 4:25. So 20 minutes earlier than a lot of the late games. It's one of those things that kind of gets mixed in the shuffle, so you don't want to miss the kickoff between the Jets and the Broncos Sunday in Denver. And by most accounts, it sounds like the Jets are not going to have Elijah Moore. He's not going to be active for this game. To be honest with you, I don't know how the coaching staff could activate him. I think that to have credibility, they have to have him on the bench in this game. You can't have guys doing what Elijah Moore did yesterday. So they'll have to navigate this game without Elijah Moore. Now, to be honest with you, Elijah Moore's not really played a big role in the last couple of wins. He had a pretty good game against Pittsburgh 3 weeks ago, but against Miami, especially against Green Bay, where again he was not targeted, really was not involved in the game plan. So I guess from that standpoint, I do think the Jets are going to need to throw the ball at some point this season, and having Elijah Moore on the field is going to help them. This is going to be a tough week to throw the ball, though. And the Jets, the last couple of weeks, have kind of morphed into a run-first offense, and that's going to have to continue because Denver has one of the best passing defenses in the league. They have a top corner. We talk about Sauce Gardner all the time, and rightly so. Denver's got a great corner of their own, Patrick Surtain. You may remember him. If you're old enough, you may remember his dad playing with the Dolphins. Patrick Surtain, though, tremendous corner. And, the lack of Elijah Moore kind of hurts from the standpoint that, I don't know that he'd draw Surtain a lot. I think it probably would be Garrett Wilson, maybe Corey Davis a little bit more. But if you're playing up against an elite corner, and last week Garrett Wilson had a lot of problems with Jair Alexander. I mean, Jair Alexander beat Garrett Wilson. It's not the end of the world for Garrett Wilson, rookie going against an elite corner, but your secondary options become more important because you can't really count on your top target in the passing game. And so losing a supporting player like Elijah Moore, it could hurt in this game. But the Jets are going to have a tough time throwing the ball. And the Jets are going to be tested off the edge. Bradley Chubb, star-level pass rusher for the Broncos, and Baron Browning, who's really kind of emerged. An interesting story. A guy who was an off-ball linebacker has kind of moved over to the edge and is providing some decent pass rush. So Dwayne Brown and Elijah Vera Tucker both playing well on the edge will be tested in this one. It's going to be tough to throw the ball, though. Denver has a top-notch pass defense. And this kind of goes into what the Jets are doing because Denver's run defense is not as good as their pass defense. You look at the efficiency stats, you look at the runs per carry, they're around middle of the pack. They're not bad, but they're not great. They're nowhere near as good as they are in pass defense. And for the Broncos, against a lot of teams, that's going to be pretty good. That's going to help you against. You want to be good against the pass. If you can only be good against the pass or against the run, well, you want to be both, but you choose the pass if you could only choose one. The Jets are a unique team because they become this run-oriented offense behind Breece Hall. Breece Hall has become the guy on offense. And, even in the passing game, if the Jets are having issues getting the ball to their receivers, I could see them working some screens in. I could see Breece Hall being Zach Wilson's best friend this week in the check down game if the receivers downfield are not open. It's going to be Breece Hall. And, I mentioned it yesterday when I spoke with the guys on Locked On Broncos. Matchup I got my eyes on is Elijah Vera Tucker versus Baron Browning because I think Baron Browning has become a good edge rusher. I'm not sure he's that great as an edge setter, though. I know the guys at Locked On Broncos seem to feel differently, but from what I've seen, they are the experts to be fair. But from what I've seen, I think that's a matchup that could favor the Jets. I like the way Elijah Vera Tucker's playing. I like the way, not so much last week, but I like the way in general he's been run blocking this season. The Jets like to run the ball to the right. The Jets are a team that's much more frequent running the ball to the right than they are to the left. So that's the Vera Tucker side, and that's a guy I see the Jets they'll get going. Jets have had a couple receivers on the injury report this week. Braxton Berrios was limited at practice earlier in the week with a back injury. Corey Davis has also been limited this week. It sounds like these guys are going to be okay to go. So another thing I have my eye on is whether this means more time on the outside for Garrett Wilson, because Garrett Wilson's been seeing a fair share of time in the slots recently. And again, I think it's going to be a tough matchup against Surtain because I'm assuming he's going to match up against Denver's number one corner quite frequently. But I think what's intriguing about this is there's been this discussion in the Jets fan base about whether Elijah Moore should be playing the slot more and Garrett Wilson should be playing outside. And I kind of have half an opinion on this. The Moore slot stuff has been going on for over a year. And, that began early last season because he wasn't playing that well. So people look at this guy and they say he's 5'10", well, he must be too small to play outside. And I said it at the time last year. I felt like he was doing fine on the outside. The Jets just weren't finding him in the passing game. And then around midseason, they started hitting him. He started having some big games, and we did not hear anything else about him needing to play in the slot in the offseason. And I look at this, I'm watching the film on Elijah Moore, and I don't know how much it's worth talking about him because he's not playing, but it doesn't seem like he's having any issues with physicality. I mean, he's not a good contested catch guy, which is not to be expected, a guy with his size, but he's not really getting jammed at the line. He's doing fine in the physical aspect of the game. However, I do think Garrett Wilson might be better suited. I think he could play the slot. I think he's got the tools to eventually thrive in the slot, but that game against Cleveland where he posted those monster numbers, is mostly outside, and most of his production was outside in that game. So if Berrios plays, I'm assuming he's playing and Moore's out, the Jets are a little bit less diverse in the alignments they can show you at the receiver position because right now they have three guys who kind of move in and out of the slot and can move in and outside. Berrios is more confined to the slot. That's just kind of what he is. He's a guy physically who I don't think could really hold up on the outside. But that means Garrett Wilson could pretty much be outside full time. I'll be interested to see how he operates. Again, I'm not expecting much from the Jets passing game in this one. I think it's going to be another Breece Hall kind of game. You're going to need Breece Hall to go for 120 or something like that. He's going to need to post a big day. He's going to need to help out in the passing game. But it is one thing I do have my eye on, even if this is going to be a run-oriented game for the Jets. Now, as we move to the other side of the ball, I'm afraid to say it, but if you look at the way these teams are playing, Jets defense looks like it has an advantage against Denver. Who would have thought that? Anybody would be saying that at the beginning of the year after Denver traded for Russell Wilson. Ahead here on the Locked On Jets podcast, we'll close out the show by talking about Jets defense versus Broncos offense. Would you believe that the Jets are actually slight underdogs to the 2-4 Denver Broncos this weekend? It's tough to believe. A 4-2 team is coming off a win against Green Bay. But if you're a Jets fan, you've been laying money down on them every week, you've probably done pretty well so far this season. And you should know that if you want to put money down on this game or any other game, BetOnline.net is your number one source for betting football and the start of the new basketball season. You can find all of the latest player developments, team matchups, news, podcasts, and in-depth analysis on every game. And as always, BetOnline remains your continued source for all of your sports wagering information with live betting and up-to-the-minute scores on every sport out there. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your favorite games and events, including the baseball playoffs, including the start of the NBA season, the start of the NHL season, MMA, boxing, and golf. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline, where the game starts. This is the Locked On Jets podcast here on this Friday. We're talking Jets Broncos. Sunday, again, I'm going to say it one more time. You may be getting tired of it. 4:05, not 4:25, if you want to catch the kickoff. I don't want you to tune in and it's halfway through the first quarter. So remember, 4:05 Sunday. At the start of the season, this looked like a really tough matchup for the Jets because the Broncos had just traded for Russell Wilson, and the Jets had the Jets defense. Maybe the worst defense in the league last year. And early this season, the Jets defense was not playing so well. The defense is looking really good the last couple of weeks. And Denver's not looking as good as we thought they'd be. Russell Wilson, I'm afraid to say, I hate to say it before the Jets play him because the second I say it, he's going to go off for like 400 yards. But Russell Wilson does not look like Russell Wilson. I don't know whether he's going to figure it out. I hope he doesn't figure it out this weekend, but it's looking like it may be the end of the line. And, everybody thought Seattle made this crazy trade when they gave up Russell Wilson, and they did not get enough for him, and they gave up their quarterback. And now they're going to Geno Smith. Suddenly they look great because Geno's playing well. Russell Wilson looks completely finished. Again, I hesitate to say it. Denver's without Javonte Williams, their star back. Michael Carter's, the guy who was kind of like the tandem with Michael Carter in North Carolina. This Denver offense has some issues right now, and I love this Quinnen Williams-Dalton Reisner matchup. I think Quinnen Williams for the most part lines up against the other team's left guard. I think this is a big advantage for the Jets up front. I just Russell Wilson could be playing banged up. He's not really moving that well anyway. He may not have the movement skills. I love the way this Jets defensive line is playing. I don't love this. This Denver receiving core is okay, but I don't think it's spectacular. I like the matchups with Sauce and DJ Reed against these Denver receivers. I think the Jets defense could have another big day in this one. It's funny because at the start of the season, we were looking at these matchups and we saw these. It looked like just an impossible slate of quarterbacks that the Jets were going up against. And suddenly, it hasn't looked so bad. Now, part of it's they've gotten a couple backup quarterbacks along the way. Part of it's Aaron Rodgers was not Aaron Rodgers last week. Aaron Rodgers was banged up. Now you could be playing against a Russell Wilson who looks, first of all, kind of compromised anyway. But also, could be playing through an injury, and if not him, then Brett Rippon. I think the Jets, I'm scared to say it because this Jets defense a year ago, or heck, a month ago, I would have never thought the Jets defense would have an advantage going into a game. But I look at these matchups across the board, and I see advantages. And I think that if the Jets defense plays its best, they're going to hold Denver down. Denver will get the offense always has success even in games where at some points where the defense is playing great, but I think the Jets have a really good shot at shutting Denver down, which is what they need. You don't want to get into a situation where you fall behind, then you let those pass rushers get up the field, you're putting the ball in Zach Wilson's head. The formula for the Jets is play great defense, run the ball effectively, and ask Zach to hit a few throws here or there. And if they do that, they're going to have a great chance of winning this game. I'm scared of this stadium. I don't know whether there are any numbers backing this up. I'm always afraid of going to Denver. It's got a reputation for being one of the loudest outdoor stadiums in the league. I know all the stuff about playing at altitude. Again, I don't have any data backing this up. I just hate playing in Denver. The stadium, even when the Broncos are bad, it scares me because it just feels like it's a house of horrors when you go in there. It feels like you seldom get an easy victory in Denver. But the way this thing's lining up, I mean, this is a game I dare say I feel like the Jets should win. But you have to avoid the letdown. And, the other aspect of this is you wonder how much what's happened this week has distracted the team. This will be a good test for the Jets. So, first of all, can they handle prosperity? Can they handle all the victories? Can they handle being on a winning streak? Do they have the maturity to continue playing well? And also, can they block out the distractions of Elijah Moore? If they get a win this week and go to 5-2, big things could be happening this season. And we'll see what happens Sunday. But that's all for today's episode. This has been the Locked On Jets podcast. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day is our motto. If you enjoy this show, hit the subscribe button where you're watching or listening. You'll get notifications as new episodes are posted. You'll never miss an episode. If you're listening on a podcast source, please give this show a 5-star review. It helps the channel out. It helps other Jets fans find the podcast. So does giving this episode a thumbs up if you're watching on YouTube. Enjoy the game. Enjoy your weekend. We'll be back later to talk more Jets.